Storytelling is critically important on all levels, in my opinion, to everyone. It is critically important here. We, because of our geographic location, because of our, in some cases, isolation, became really well versed as a people, as a culture, in telling stories. We tell stories so that we frame our reality. We tell stories to understand our reality. We tell stories to figure out what we don't understand or cannot explain. That's where some of the frightening stories come in. If we can't explain it, if we don't know why something was, or what we saw, or what we heard in the dark of night, we have to create a story about that.
My favorite thing every year is to get to talk about our ghost experiences in the library, and I always tell them I could not take the full 2-hour tour and tell you everything that's happened. It's just impossible. There's so many things, doors slamming and voices, and we're just used to it. Then we had a paranormal investigator team come in because we had so much activity, and then we captured a picture of a spirit upstairs. So after that picture came out, we started getting a little bit of attention. This team came and set up overnight, and at that point, I knew that we really had something going on. They captured a ball flying across the room and a little boy saying the word ball at the same time. They introduced me to dowsing rods. Old Appalachians used to use them for finding graves and finding water, but we use them for talking to spirits. And so we have communicated with him, and is supposedly a 12-year-old boy that resides down here. He's just a happy little guy that was unfortunately sick and gone too soon, and so he says that we're fun and he hangs around. We just talk to him like he's with us and try to make his time enjoyable. He loves story time and hanging out with the kids and seeing the kids play, and so we're okay with it. I mean, we don't mind his presence at all. We're just used to it. But he does get a little tricky sometimes, just to be mischievous. Also seems like most of the spirits that we've come in contact with are not angry, they're not bitter, they're here. And they just want people to know that they're here.
Historically, folks have told stories about ghosts and haints and vampires and boogeymen and all manner of demons and witches and all of that in an effort to understand where they are and what an event was. We tell stories about witches because some people do things or an event happens that we can't explain. So we have to try to rationalize it so our mind can get wrapped around it. My grandmother told me once that when she was a young girl, she and her sister were sleeping in the loft of the cabin that they lived in, and late at night they heard a knock on the door, and someone came into the house, a male relative that they weren't real familiar with, they'd heard stories about. The topic got around, he was a witch. And one of the adults who was downstairs having the conversation said, "Well, Jess, how in the world do you get to be a witch? I've always wondered, what do you got to do?" And he said, "Well, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I'll tell you anyway. You got to take your rifle. You got to take a clean white sheet. You got to go to the top of the highest mountain that you can find. And when the sun first peaks up in the sky, you have to take your rifle. You have to spread the sheet on the ground first, but then you take your rifle and you shoot at that sunball and you curse God. And a dot of blood will appear in the center of that sheet. You got to suck that blood out, and then you're going to be committed to the devil. And he'll give you the ability to do things that you never thought possible. You can put a curse on people. You can make water go bad. You can make cows dry up. But first, You got to curse the good man and suck out that drop of blood. There are different categories of scary stories, right? So there are jump tales. There are those stories that you tell, and at the end of it, you want people to know. You want them to you want them to jump back. There are other stories that are deeply frightening on a whole different level, because they're about a true thing. They're about something that happened in history. But those are scary because you have to be able to determine what was real and what was not.
School Hill, where the old high school is located now, is well known as probably the most haunted place in Whitesburg. Almost every building there has a story that somebody tells about a ghost or about an experience they've had in that building. But in 1910, no college had been built still. No high school had been built. But what was built there was a gallows. Floyd Frazier would be hanged on that gallows in 1910 for events that took place 3 years before up on Perk Creek, just outside of Whitesburg. At that time, there was a young widow named Ellen Flannery who lived up there with her 5 children.
When my grandfather was looking for his mother, she had sent him and his older sister to town to trade some eggs for bacon. That was the first morning that she had sent her brother back to Virginia. She went up on the hillside to pick salad greens, and she was had a harvesting knife, and at some point someone came up there on that ridge and raped her, cut her clothes off of her, stabbed her 47 times, and then they drug her body down into a ravine within 2 yards of the cabin where the 3 younger children were.
It wasn't an easy death or a clean death. It was a bloody, brutal, and violent death. And there have been tales ever since the murder happened. There are the sightings of the woman in white. Folks have seen the spirit of a woman in an old-fashioned white dress while going up or crossing over Pine Mountain, especially on moonless nights. Many folks have seen this apparition. They say that it's Ellen Flannery, still trying to make her way back to that little homestead that she shared with her children, eternally bound to the area in which she died that horrific death. Whitesburg and its surrounding areas are chock full of ghost stories. And how could it not be? After all, the town has seen murders, a lynching, and the first and last legal hanging in Letcher County. And when 3,500 people show up to watch Floyd Frazier hang for Ellen's murder, well, it was bound to leave its mark in one way or another on our tiny, quiet town. I think that any form of storytelling, period, is important to our community. Just because you look at a story on the outside and think it's not important doesn't mean that you can't glean some sort of historic knowledge from it. I mean, stories are a part of us, so I will always tell stories. Haunted or not, I will always tell them. Can you make the rods go in opposite directions, one to each side, if you're the same one?
All right. All
Okay.
understand this? Yeah.
Okay. Are you that little boy that I talked to last time? Can you make the rods cross if you're that little boy that I talked to last time? Whoa, let me reset. I think that was me.
Yeah, if they move real swift or fast.
Can you make the rods cross if you're that little boy I talked to? That's not me.
No, if it was you, it'd be going crazy.
It crossed though, didn't
close. Yep. Yeah, it's crossed.